Vaishnavi T, 3rd DC English, Pioneer College. Readings on Democracy and Secularism. Chapter 9, Nehru and Science in the Age of Coronavirus. Written by Santosh Paul and Dr. Harsh Hegde. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more, so that we may fear less. By Marie Curie. With 4,22,829 infections worldwide and 18,907 deaths, as on March 25th, and still counting, Nehru's vision of science and his efforts in creating a scientific society gains immense importance and relevance. Science, according to Jawaharlal Nehru, was the major triumph of the human mind, which could liberate humankind from illness, want, and misery. Nehru understood the important role of scientific temper in nation building. He wrote that the search for the truth and new knowledge, the refusal to accept anything without testing or trial, the capacity to change previous conclusions in the face of new evidence, the reliance on observed facts and not on preconceived theory, the hard discipline of the mind, all this is necessary not merely for the application of science, but for life itself and the solution of its many problems. Nehru's interest in science and technology can be traced back to his opting for science tripos in Cambridge and his association with leading British scientists of the age like James Jeans, Arthur Eddington, and others. Creating scientific institutions for nation building. Nehru's blueprint was twofold. The first step was to replicate world-class institutions here in India. During his visit to the United States of America, he spent his time in understanding how the universities of America were giving the country the technical and scientific edge. His celebrated visit to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1949 ultimately leads to the creation of the 5 iconic Indian institutes of technology in Kharagpur 1950, Bombay 1958, Madras 1959, Kanpur 1959, and Delhi 1961. The second insightful move was to identify and to choose the greatest scientists of the times to serve the interest of nation building. Thus, Vikram Sarabhai, Sir C.V. Raman, Homi J. Baba, Satish Dhawan, S.S. Bhatnagar, and several others were entrusted to run the premium institutes of scientific learning and research. Nehru was fully cognizant to the fact that science would require acceptance from society and support from the government to sustain and deliver. His limitless tenacity enabled in turning bureaucracies into engines of scientific advancement, best exemplified by the creation of Department of Atomic Energy 1954, the Baba Atomic Research Center 1954, the Physical Research Laboratory 1947, the Indian Space Research Organization 1962, and the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research CSIR 1942. Under the stewardship of S.S. Bhatnagar, Nehru helped set up the National Chemical Laboratory, the National Physical Laboratory, the Fuel Research Station, the Glass and Ceramics Research Institute, and the National Metallurgical Laboratory. Nehru's detractors. Nehru had his detractors then, as is now. Pseudo-nationalism was invoked to subvert his scientific mission but withdrew before his conviction. In quotation, science has no frontiers. Nobody ought to talk about English science. French science. Science is bigger than the countries. Quotation close. Equally important was to him the role of scientific temper in nation building. Social philosophy and the socialist programs. Nehru was alive to both the creative and destructive side of science. Therefore, it was integral to Nehru to work for the world peace and evolve a cooperative venture involving all the humanity. He refused to participate in the wars of conflicting ideologies and steered clear of the Cold War. It was an adventure which India could do without. But nations may have to fight battles to eradicate epidemics and pandemics like smallpox. Smallpox killed the son and heir of the English Queen Anne in 1700 and numerous members of the aristocracy and upper classes. With a 14-day incubation period, the COVID-19 is also no respecter of divisions or possessions. Viewed from this perspective, Nehru's idea of public institutions adopting the utilitarian principle of the greatest good to the greatest number assumes significance. In a time when misguided attempts are made to remove the word socialist from the preamble of the Constitution of India, it would do well to remember that post-independence revolutionary attempts and mass campaigns were made by the socialist policies of the government to eradicate smallpox, polio, plague, and skew the growth of many other deadly diseases. Fighting the epidemics. In the post-independent India, almost half the population lived in highly malarial areas and large-scale control operations commenced in 1953. In the span of a decade, malarial infections were so low that it was left to the local authorities. In 1951, smallpox-related deaths totaled 1,48,000, and in a span of 10 years, it was reduced to 12,300 deaths. Every 5-year plan began to dedicate more and more resources to fight these epidemics which were ravaging the population. The plague, which accounted for 3% of deaths around 1940, was completely eradicated by the middle of 1950s. Also, Herculean efforts were being made to control venereal diseases, leprosy, filariasis, diphtheria, typhoid, whooping cough, pneumonia, meningitis, and rabies. These endemic diseases in the Indian context were brought under control by public healthcare systems, accessible and affordable medicines, and widespread government-initiated vaccination programs. Creating the infrastructure and training personnel. Along with huge resource allocations to fight epidemics, it was necessary to bring in a large number of medical practitioners and for that establish new medical colleges and upgrade existing ones. The number of medical colleges rose from 15 in 1946 to 81 in 1965, and the number of students admitted went from 1,200 to 10,000 by the year 1965. Nehruian policy making. Exemplar is Kerala, where successive Congress and Communist governments have worked within the domain and parameter of a welfare state. They have steadfastly refused to be strayed into privatization and ensured ever widening of its public health facilities. It is no wonder that Kerala is able to combat the COVID-19 virus better than some of the advanced countries of the world. Nehru's relevance is visible as the world fights the deadly pandemic. Affordable healthcare will certainly gain space given the fact that in the midst of this pandemic, nations which have invested in affordable public healthcare systems like China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Singapore, Cuba have been able to deal with it with far greater efficiency than richer countries. Nehru's faith in science. Nehru's optimism and faith in man's quest for science will always ring a bell in this age of coronavirus. Man, he said, in quotation, has hurled defiance at the elemental powers and with his mind, cradle of revolution, sought to master them. Whatever gods they be, there is something godlike in man. Quotation close. Aware of science's triumph over the scourge of the bubonic plague, syphilis, typhus, or cholera, Nehru wrote to his daughter in Glimpses of the World History in 1934, in quotation, sanitation and health and the conquest over some diseases depend on science. Quotation. Nehru lives through his institutions in the age of coronavirus. The All India Institute of Medical Sciences was set up in 1956, Maulana Azad Medical College in 1958, Govind Ballabh Pant Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research in 1961, along with other public health institutions. Not to forget, in this age of coronavirus, the National Institute of Virology, Pune, was set up as early as 1952. It is this faith that Nehru placed on science and the scientific institutions he built with the ablest of men, and also the relentless effort of the scientific institutions which he nurtured, would help us confront this devastating worldwide scourge. About the authors and writer. This is a jointly written online newspaper article by Santosh Paul and Dr. Harsh Hegde. The former is a senior advocate, Supreme Court of India. He is the author of Choosing Hammurabi, Debates on Judicial Appointments, LexisNexis, Appointing Our Judges, Forging Independence and Accountability, LexisNexis, and The Maoist Movement in India, Perspectives and Counter-Perspectives, Routledge, Harsh Hegde is a doctor and the executive director of Fortis's Courts. This article is inspired by the appreciation for Nehru and his relentless efforts to develop scientific temper in India. The article sums up Nehru's insight and initiatives in building prime institutions and finding remarkable scientists to head them. The article charts the history of establishment of these institutions and also that of the public health care system that functions relatively well. Glossary. Scientific temper. It is a phrase used by Nehru in 1946 in The Discovery of India, page 512. The phrase, in brief, denotes an attitude of approaching life and world applying one's critical faculty. The use of rational faculty for observation, analysis, hypothesis, trial and testing, and correction in the case of new evidences is the scientific method. Science Tripos, NST, means wide range of natural sciences taught alongside history and philosophy of science at Cambridge. James Jeans and Arthur Eddington, scientists who were founders of British cosmology. Cognizant means aware. Sustain means exist and function. Deliver means produce the desired results. Tenacity means determination. Bureaucracies means government officials. Detractors means people who always find fault with. Cold War means a state of enmity that creates panic. 5-year plan means a centralized and integrated national economic plans. 12 Plan 2012 to 2017 was India's last 5-year plan. Epidemics means a disease that spreads over a region, confined to a region, Ravaging means cause extensive destruction. Herculean means superhuman. Venereal diseases means sexually transmitted diseases. Endemic means disease, constant presence in a region. Pandemic means spreading over all countries. Welfare state means a political system in which the state takes care of the health and other interests of the people. Scourge means causing misery and death. Answer in 2 or 3 sentences. Question number 1. What is scientific temper? Question number 2. What is an epidemic? Question number 3. How did Nehru respond to his detractors? Question number 4. Whom did Nehru choose for managing the new institutions? Question number 5. What was the triumph of science according to Nehru? Answer in 80 to 100 words. Question number 1. Give an account of the establishment of IITs in India. Question number 2. What is scientific temper and scientific method? Question number 3. Nehru's faith in science. Fight against the epidemics. Question number 1. Answer in 200 to 250 words. Question number 2. How did Nehru go about planning for a welfare state? Question number 3. How did Nehru's scientific temper help in laying the foundational infrastructure of the nation? Read, relate and write. Question number 1. Read Ambedkar's speech and connect it to Nehru's effort at nation building. Language matters. First question. The essay is written in the context of COVID-19. Find out the various words and phrases which acquired significance in the context of the pandemic and write a short note about these words. Question number 2. Read the poem given below and study the use of words like surreal, science, gland, committee of hormones, a thyroid, and a brain by a disordered stomach driven. Compare the attitude to science. Poem. A dream of surreal science. In bracket, Sri Aurobindo, bracket close. One dreamed and saw a gland, write Hamlet. Drink at the mermaid, capture immorality. A committee of hormones on the Aegean's brink composed the Iliad and the Odyssey. A thyroid, meditating almost nude under the bo tree, saw the eternal light and, rising from its mighty solitude, spoke of the wheel and eightfold path all right. A brain by a disordered stomach driven, thundered through Europe, conquered, ruled and fell. From St. Helena went, perhaps, to heaven. Thus wagged on the surreal world until a scientist played with atoms and blew out the universe before God had time to shout.